Very happy to be in Spain to celebrate the publication of Nourishing Traditions in Spanish by Diente de Leon Publishers. This is a huge book to translate, so I'm very grateful that Nourishing Traditions can be available now to the Spanish-speaking population throughout the world. So my work was inspired by the work of Dr. Weston Price, who was a dentist who traveled the world in the 1930s seeking out healthy, non-industrialized people. And he found 14 groups that had perfect dental health, that is, no cavities, no decay, and naturally straight teeth, because they had very broad faces and wide dental palates. Overall, they were very healthy. They seemed to be immune, for example, to tuberculosis, which was a huge health problem in those days. So he then analyzed their foods and found that their foods were very high in vitamins and minerals. They were nutrient dense, much higher than the American diet of his day. And he concluded that the key to health is maximizing the nutrition in your food. This is first and foremost by choosing nutrient-dense foods. This would include certain types of seafoods, animal fats, organ meats, meat. And in our case, we want to make sure that the animals are raised outside on pasture because there'll be a lot higher nutrient density if that's the case. Animal fats are essential for health. And we have been the victims of 100 years of propaganda against animal fats. But in order to be healthy, you need to include as much as possible animal fats in your diet of good quality. This means eating butter. This means cooking in lard or beef fat, tallow. This means eating the skin on the chicken. That's where the good fat is. This means eating the fat on your meat. So this is very, very important. And lots of butter. I put butter on my vegetables, on my oatmeal, on my potatoes. Sometimes I put butter on my meat or my fish. Butter is the healthiest fat on the planet. So this diet is not a diet that excludes certain food groups. We are an inclusive diet. It's just that we show you how to prepare the foods, or in the case of dairy foods, not to prepare them, not to heat them, so that they are digestible and healthy for us. So on the one hand, you have milk, which is a very delicate food designed to be easily digested. It should not be heated. But on the other hand, you have grains and legumes, which have been a part of human diets forever, but they need to be very carefully prepared so we can digest them. That means soaking and fermenting. I'm kind of shocked. I see this often in Europe, but sometimes in America also, people eating raw oatmeal. This will kill you. It's so hard to digest. So things like oats and grains need to be soaked overnight in something acidic. It starts to break down it activates enzymes and starts to break down the irritants and anti-nutrients in these grains, and then these grains need to be cooked with salt and salt water. And then when we eat our oatmeal, we eat it with some kind of fat like cream or butter so that we can absorb all the minerals that are liberated by the process of soaking and cooking. So one of the themes in Nourishing Traditions is the importance of lacto-fermented foods, raw lacto-fermented foods. Every single culture in the world, there are no exceptions, has fermented foods. And the fermented food we probably recognize most easily is fermented cabbage or sauerkraut. These fermented foods provide good bacteria for our intestinal tract. It completely accords with what science has discovered about our digestive tract, that we should have 6 pounds of good bacteria in the small and large intestine to digest our food, to protect us from toxins and so forth. And by eating fermented foods, we are replenishing those bacteria every day. Okay, so industrial milk, the kind that you find everywhere in the supermarkets, today is ultra pasteurized, which means that it's heated to 230 degrees Fahrenheit. about 110 degrees centigrade, above the boiling point. And this completely destroys the integrity of the proteins in the milk. It disrupts all the enzymes that help us absorb the vitamins and minerals in milk. And the heated milk is very allergenic, and it's no wonder that so many people have allergies to milk. And the consumption of pasteurized milk, industrial milk, is going down from 1 to 3% per year. Milk is a substance, it's a nature's perfect food. It's a very good food for people who are sick because you don't have to do any work to absorb all the nutrients. 100% of the nutrients are absorbed in raw milk, raw whole milk. And we need to have access to this food. We have the technology today to produce very safe raw milk and get it to every child who needs it in the world. We really do have that technology. Instead, we're using that technology to destroy the milk and to make it extremely hard to digest. So we have to choose, how are we going to use our technology to provide healthy milk or to destroy healthy milk? One objection to my philosophy is that it requires that you cook, and we don't have time to cook, right? Well, most people can make time to cook, and it's a very pleasurable activity. For me, cooking was a time to be with my children. They sat at the counter and I tested their spelling words, or it was a very together time to be in the kitchen. So it's certainly not wasted time. But in Europe, you have a lot of resources that make it unnecessary to cook. You can buy ham and cheese and olives and sourdough bread and butter, and voila, there's your meal right there. You don't have to cook. It's much easier in Europe. Or you buy pate or maybe blood sausage that you cut up and cook. Yeah, so that's very easy. It's not hard in Europe to eat a healthy diet. So where do you buy the food? Preferably not the supermarket. You have plenty of artisan shops. The farm, that's a lot of time. But many farms have delivery programs, ordering. Now we have the internet, we can order these things online. So the argument is that, well, these artisan foods are more expensive. But remember, when you are counting up what you spend on food, you also have to count what you're spending on medical. Now, in 1900 in America, we spent something like 7% or 17% of our income on food and 3% on medical. Today, we're spending 10% on our food, but another 10% on medical. So it ends up being more. You can't afford not to eat good food. So you're talking about the typical breakfast in Spain, which has been, of course, promoted by the food industry, the extruded breakfast cereal with ultra-pasteurized milk, usually skim milk, or a very sugary pastry, or both. This is a terrible thing to do to a child. You're starting them off with a very high sugar breakfast. It is the fast track to diabetes, and it does not nourish them. They can't concentrate very well when they have this kind of breakfast. The ultra-pasteurized milk is highly allergenic, and the breakfast cereals themselves are processed in a way that creates toxins. One study found that if you fed cornflakes to rats, they died before the rats that got the box that the cornflakes came in. So they're toxic. These breakfast cereals are toxic. Children need a good breakfast with protein and fats. Again, it's very easy. Put out that beautiful ham and cheese, a piece of bread and some butter. Don't have to cook that. That is a good breakfast for a child. Eggs, cook eggs, scrambled eggs, fried eggs, have it with bacon or sausage. Another great meal for a child. Or if you want to do grains, you do oatmeal that you've soaked overnight and served with butter or cream. Please don't let your children go out the door without a good breakfast of good protein, but especially good fats, and not all the sugar and carbs. Salt is essential for life. We cannot live without salt. The idea that we should reduce salt is not based on good science. The most definitive study about salt showed that the ideal consumption was between 1.5 teaspoons and 3 teaspoons. And that's what most people are eating today. That was the best health outcome. So one of the really big blessings of living in the modern age is that we all have access to inexpensive salt. In the past, dictators and empires controlled people by withholding salt. And a good case in point was the huge tax on salt that England put on the salt in India. That was the trigger for the revolution in India. So we have access to salt. We think it's better to use unrefined salt that has a lot of trace minerals in it. But one thing you don't have to worry about is salt. Just salt your food until it tastes good to you. Sugary drinks. They are the scourge of modern man. A typical American gets a half a cup of sugar a day from sugary drinks. We will not survive as a humankind if we consume these sugary drinks. And a lot of people have always known that. My family, we were not allowed to have them. They were never in the house. We were forbidden from drinking sugary drinks, sodas. And then when my children were growing up, if a child came over with a can of soda, I made them leave it outside just to show we didn't approve of these things. And it's really heartless, unwise for parents to allow their children to drink these things. There's nothing in them but sugar and caffeine. And caffeine is never good for children, not for adults either, but certainly not for growing children. We do have alternatives. In the case of children, the ideal beverage, especially in the morning, is raw milk, very nourishing. We also have kombucha, which is kind of new on the scene, which is a healthy soft drink, especially if you get the low sugar ones. So there's alternatives to the sugary drinks, and they will destroy us if we don't refuse them. Olive oil is the healthiest of the liquid oils. It's not a seed oil, it's a fruit oil, like coconut or palm oil. These are fruit oils. They are much healthier than the seed oils. The problem with olive oil in much of the world is that it's adulterated with seed oils. So in Spain, you definitely need to be careful to buy your olive oil from someone, a company you know that's growing the olives and not adding anything to it. The test for this is if you put your olive oil in the refrigerator, it should get thick, almost like a gel. But if it's been adulterated, it'll stay as a liquid oil. So that's how you know. Apparently, the extra virgin olive oil in Spain is carefully regulated and is pure olive oil. But again, olive oil is fine. You make your salad dressing with olive oil, but it does not contain the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K. So you don't just want to use olive oil. You want to use butter and lard and other animal fats. Yes, so the question is, what about organic? I do think we should be careful in what we buy, not just vegetables, but grains and meats, everything. I wouldn't be obsessive about it. You can eat some non-organic things, but I would do your best to make sure the food you buy is clean. How do you start? This is such an overwhelming idea to change your diet, to clean up your diet. Well, you start by getting your fats right. So just get off the industrial seed oils, eat butter, cook in lard, use animal fats. Coconut oil is a good oil, and then make sure you're really getting pure olive oil.